Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Silverstone review of the Winging It F1 podcast. I'm here with Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chu, and I am Freddie Coates. And what do you guys think after that sort of race of two halves? I mean, the start of it was a bit weird, and then the end of it was absolutely crazy. Adam, what do you think?
It wasn't really, up until about lap 50, it wasn't a great race. I mean, there were two safety car incidents, but they didn't really create much, switch up the order much. And it kind of looked like Mercedes were out front. Bottas was, he was staying in touch with Lewis, but kind of as we now know, that's because he was kind of pushing to the maximum, whereas Lewis was saving a bit. And so it kind of, there wasn't too much doing up until that point, I thought, but just what an end. You know, it's kind of unique. I can't think of any race that finished like that, and it's spectacular. He's finished on three wheels. It's just incredible, and I think it's a shame that fans weren't there to witness it, because it would have been an absolutely brilliant atmosphere both to be there and kind of coming through the TV if the fans cheering him on to the end. But yeah, it's just what a finish, really, is the main memory of it.
Yeah, it was a very strange finish. It was a bit like, I think it was in 1982 or 1984 Monaco Grand Prix, where five different leaders crashed or something on the last 2 or 3 laps. But before that, nothing happened. And yeah, it was a bit like that today. It was kind of crazy, really. Mercedes, I guess, like I think many people thought, just like myself, oh, Mercedes is cruising outside and not pushing that hard. But it turns out they had the biggest problems with the tyres, and they only just held on to the win. And why on earth Red Bull putting Max Verstappen up, I really don't know.
Yeah, that seems to be the heartbreak of the top three. Verstappen pitting for a fastest lap, despite Bottas already having had the puncture, and there was the potential for Hamilton's puncture. I did also think that was a little bit strange.
I think on that, I don't know, Christian Horner, when they spoke to him afterwards, and I don't know how much this is kind of a deflection tactic, but he said they'd noticed grading on Max's as well. So they were kind of half worried about whether his would last the distance as well. So I don't know kind of how much he's kind of bigging that up, so it doesn't feel like they lost a race so much. But, you know, I guess there is that element to it, but kind of on the face of it, it did seem quite a strange decision where you've got a potential reward of 6 points if you get the win over the 1 point if you get the fastest lap.
Yeah, it was reminiscent also of the 2017 British Grand Prix, where both Ferraris got punctures in the closing stages of the race and put themselves essentially out of contention. Well, yeah, out of contention for the podium positions. But yeah, what do we think of the tyre blast? If you think Kvyat's crash at the beginning was also a tyre blowout, which I do, from what I've seen, do we think Pirelli are going to be coming under a lot of flack this week for Carlos Sainz as well, getting a tyre failure in the closing stages of the race, as well as the two Mercs? Nigel?
I don't think they should, really, because if you see that your tyres might blow out, just pit again. It's that simple. You don't have to do it on a one stop. Obviously, that is the quickest way nowadays. But, you know, 2012, 2011, they used to do 3, even 4 pit stops.
Yeah.
So if you think, you know, your tyre is going to have a puncture, just pit again. So I think Pirelli will get some criticism. But for me, yeah, I think this is part of the game, really.
Adam, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think it depends how it goes. I can't really see there being too much criticism from this race, because it's kind of, I guess, more down to the teams, and I guess also people aren't really I don't think people are gonna mind as much because it happened to the Mercedes. So I think people will, it was created a good race, but I think it depends how they handle it now. If they go with the softer compounds, which they have said they'll do, and they were planning to run softer compounds next week, if they go with that and there's a lot more tyre blowouts, they'll get a lot of scrutiny there. So I think it kind of depends how it runs next week and whether we see a repeat or whether it's a one-off.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one thing I would say is I don't really understand how they were literally doing fastest laps, 3 or 4 laps before Bottas and Hamilton had the tyre failures. So it was really weird because the tyres don't really drop off much. You kind of just stay at a constant and then they just suddenly blew out.
Well, about 10 laps from the end, Bottas radioed saying he had blistering and he had vibrations. Not a flat spot or anything, but he was experiencing tyre wear. And we knew that. We've seen that quite a lot, even though it's not that hot today in Silverstone. It was on Friday, obviously. Third hottest day in recorded history in the UK. He still had the pace, but Verstappen was getting the fastest lap and he was matching the pace of Bottas. Verstappen had the fastest lap for a good few laps around that point, and Bottas was dropping back off Hamilton by. I mean, he was managing the gap to Verstappen, which was the necessary part, but he wasn't managing a gap to Hamilton, who, as Adam said earlier, had conserved his tyres a bit better. That's been a consistent weakness for Bottas, is that his tyre wear has just been lacking ever so slightly in his control in comparison to Hamilton. Yeah. Yes, that's mostly because he's in second place the majority of the time. So his car is going to get a little bit more beaten up in the dirty air, but the tyre wear is still the issue for Bottas.
I think what's strange though is 8 or 9 years ago, you would see the tyres drop off the pace like a lot, like 7, 8 or 8 seconds. Whereas nowadays we don't really see that. So that's what kind of surprised me with the blowouts. We saw, the tyres didn't look in good shape, but they still had reasonably good pace. So yeah, that's the only strange thing that's my only concern with the Pirelli tyres. It could just be that the drivers are managing the tyres and just staying at an even pace. But yeah, to me it's a bit weird that they don't drop off.
There's a lot to look into with the tyre wear. If you look at sort of further down the midfield, in that you had sort of quite a late race resurgence from Renault, with Esteban Ocon being behind Stroll for the majority of the race. But then Stroll sort of dipped back, and Gasly being another one who came up through the field a bit. And it sort of spoke to some cars that there was quite a lot of late race tyre wear on the hard tyres. They all went onto them earlier than planned by about 10 laps or so because of Kvyat's crash, maybe 5 or 6 laps for the soft runners. And it seemed to be that some cars definitely experienced the tyre wear a lot more than others. And that'll be very interesting to see next week.
Yeah, I mean, it was around 2012 they kind of had a really built-in cliff. And was it the Canadian Grand Prix? Kind of,
2010 Canadian Grand Prix was just completely
crazy
how the tyres were going off. And that was what Pirelli were tasked with. They went to Pirelli and said, make tyres that do this every race. And so they did. And then the 2013 British Grand Prix was dangerous. So there are levels to it. I don't like blowouts, but I like a cliff, I think, personally.
Yeah, well, I feel like they've kind of moved away from building in the cliff for most of the hybrid era that I can remember. I think it was Malaysian Grand Prix where Kimi was kind of head of a train of about 7 cars. He was like in the top 5 with a few laps to go, and then just completely dropped out there. But they've kind of moved away from that technology in the rubber. So yeah, it could just be a one-off or whatever, and maybe it's kind of certainly affecting Mercedes more. Stroll as well kind of seemed to suffer at the end. So yeah, but it did, liven up the race at the end. So I guess 6.5 doesn't of the other, unless you sign.
Yeah. It did also bring in some pretty decent performances to the forefront that wouldn't have gone under the radar, but I think were rewarded quite well. I think Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen have been a cut above their teammates all weekend. Max Verstappen in second, Charles Leclerc in third in the Ferrari. What do we think of that, Nigel? Do you have anything to say on those 2 performances?
Yeah, Verstappen again, just maximising what he's got, really, taking 18 points. He's not too far behind Bottas in the championship now. I think Red Bull will be encouraged that they seem to have better pace than they perhaps thought, because I think many people were thinking coming into the weekend that Mercedes would be well clear. But I think Verstappen was within 10, 11 seconds for most of the race. He's he must be so frustrated though that he's performing at his best, yet he still can't get anywhere near Bottas and Hamilton. So yeah, I think Verstappen will be happy, but he'll be really frustrated that he can't do any more, really.
Adam, do you have anything to say on those two?
I think Red Bull they seem obviously happy with the result, and they seemed happy with the qualifying yesterday. But yeah, I think I don't know. He's in a decent position compared to a lot of the other drivers on the grid who've fallen off, specifically Leclerc, who we'll talk about in a minute, I imagine, but Leclerc's signed this multi-year deal and is now running in the midfield, and they're saying they're not going to be winning races until 2022. So, he's not the worst position to be in the grid. But I think, for him, as long as he's getting the most out of his car, which he is doing at the moment, I guess he won't be too disappointed with it.
Yeah, the sort of the headline on times on Friday for the long run pace were from Verstappen, and because it was pretty much on a par with the Mercedes, and that was in the really hot running, which we know from experience of the majority of the turbo hybrid era that Mercedes don't like the really hot conditions. And next week is, as well as the added softer tyres, we have forecast kind of 30 plus degree heat across the UK pretty much for the whole weekend. So I think that will be another interesting point for Red Bull, and will give them a little bit of hope, but that they can maybe mix it a bit more on pace and a bit more on reliability with the Mercedes, because the heat is what has been their Achilles heel in the past few years.
Yeah, I think in general, the race pace in qualifying, Hamilton was a second ahead of Verstappen, and they seem to be a second ahead for a lot of the qualifying. But I think they are better at race pace, or whether it's just Mercedes aren't relatively as good at race pace or whatever, but they are closer. But yeah, I think the other thing is that was one of the advantages of that was tyre control, and I wasn't looking out for whether they used it today or not, but I don't know whether there was anything, because that should have been an advantage for Mercedes, and Lewis is normally very good at it anyway, but I don't know whether that came into it, or whether that's something where they should have had even more of an advantage.
I would have thought, looking at it, sorry Nige, the toe angles of the cars being sort of manipulated by the DAS, then I think that would, based on my crude knowledge of all this technical stuff, that it would sort of mess around with the tyres contact patch and actually wear them down a little bit more than they'd want, I'd have thought, because they'd be moving around a bit if they are in use. I mean, the safety car periods would be when they would use them the majority of the time, but I don't think there was much issue in heating up the tyres this race, as opposed to the wet conditions in Hungary. But I think that my crude knowledge of this, you have a heavily cambered tyre that would have more contact patch issues. So I'd have thought maybe that's similar with use of DAS, but I have no idea on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Red Bull have talked about using DAS, perhaps bringing it in the autumn, September or October, perhaps. And we don't know how long the season will be, so is it worth it, especially if it's going to be banned next year? But I think Red Bull, they set up their car more for the race, knowing that in qualifying the best they can get is third. So I think they've started, or definitely last year or even this year, they've set up the car so that it protects the tyres more, and they have better race pace, which is why we see them closer to Mercedes. But also, I think what's strange with Red Bull this year is, in the past, I'd say 2016, 2017, 2018, their car was very stable, and it was one of the best cars to drive. Whereas this year it's kind of reversed, and the car still seems very difficult to drive, especially for Albon, more so than Max. So yeah, I think Red Bull might have. I do think something has gone wrong over winter, because it's unusual for the car to still be so inconsistent. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Red Bull, what do you guys think of Alex Albon's weekend then? He finished in 8th in the end, which I think isn't the best. He was obviously penalised for his incident with Kevin Magnussen at the start of the race, which put Kevin Magnussen out of contention because he was out. Do we have anything to say about Albon? We seem to every week speak about, have a little groan about Albon and his sort of chance and how he's thrown stuff away, but also how some of it's not him, how some of it is. Adam, what do you think? Do you have anything to say about his performance and what you think of the incident at the start?
Yeah, I think up until this point, I've been kind of more protective or protecting. I didn't think he was doing that badly, and he was certainly doing a lot better than Gasly. I mean, he got Gasly kind of, his results in Red Bull in 12 races were 1 P4, 1 P5, 3 P6, a P7, 2 P8, a P10, P11, and 2 DNF. And Albon's been kind of in and around the 4th, 5th, 6th, and is 2 DNF. So when he's been fighting for a podium or a win. So I think up until this point, he'd been doing a lot better than Gasly had. And I think that was kind of, I thought some of the criticism was a bit harsh in that he's coming up against Max Verstappen, who's obviously one of the best drivers in the world. But this weekend it isn't good. And I think the worry for me wouldn't be this weekend in isolation, but it's just kind of the knock-on effect in that he wasn't, he crashed in FP2, then he didn't get out for much running in FP3, so his confidence kind of didn't look to be there for qualifying, and he qualified lowly, and then he kind of had it all to do in the race and made a bad move on Magnussen. So for me, the result's not great, but I don't think kind of one result will sink his career, but it's just kind of, he seems to be trending in the wrong direction and kind of losing confidence. And we've seen that with loads of Red Bull drivers. Kvyat kind of seems to be the one that springs most to mind in the way he kind of dropped off. So yeah, it's not great. I guess he was promoted very early, and I thought F1 put up a video on this with Will Bucks and Lawrence Barretto talking about it, and the points they made were maybe Red Bull's kind of changing it up a bit and wanting him to give him the full season. But yeah, it's not a great weekend. The only saving grace for him is that there's no one really pressuring him from the junior setup, or no one who's not had a chance in Red Bull already.
Yeah, I think you summarised it quite well there. It's the confidence, really. That crash, or not crash, the mistake with Hamilton in the first race in Austria, had he won that weekend, his confidence would have gone sky high. Yeah. Whereas now it just seems to be going downhill. It's getting worse and worse, like the crash in practice, as you mentioned. And then he was a little bit unlucky today because I think he was the first car to pit, and then there was a safety car. So then everyone else lost less time and he ended up at the back. Whereas if there wasn't a safety car, he might have undercut quite a lot of drivers. So yeah, tough weekend. It's just, how can he bounce back? Will he be able to bounce back? Hopefully he can, but yeah, he needs a really good result sooner rather than later, I'd say.
I guess the good thing is he's got a bit of an opportunity if he does come back next week, kind of having had all this trouble this week, and then comes back on the same circuit and puts in a strong performance. And even if he finishes, fourth, I think that'd be an improvement. And so if he does come back and have a good weekend next weekend, that will really send a message to Red Bull and probably do him a lot of good, but also kind of show that he's still got it and he's still got that kind of mental toughness that he needs.
It's a good opportunity for him to show marked improvement next week. Yeah, I think Christian Horner did say immediately on TV, after the race, that Albon's recovery drives were good in this race. And so, yes, he had to pit for vibrations at the start because of the incident with Magnussen, but that was what obviously wasn't known about until full speed racing, and which is obviously why he didn't put under the safety car, which then dropped him back 20 seconds off from everyone. Then he made that back up, and unfortunately there was another safety car, but he still made up positions. Then he had to pit again to the back, and so with 20 laps to go at least, maybe fewer, I can't remember when he pitted. He was dead plumb last, a good 10 seconds off the back of the grid of the pack, and he still brought it through from that. And that is a positive, and that's what Albon needs to focus on, is that bit of, you've got he has the mental resilience in that kind of race situation to still come back, put on the pace. Yeah, he is on the medium tyres, to bring it through and to achieve that result. And that is very good.
It would have been.
Yeah, go
on. No, you can finish off your point.
I was just going to say it would have been better if they could have pitted under the safety car with the Magnussen incident, and then maybe made it a bit better. But either way, he was out of sequence, and if he wasn't out of sequence, he probably could have made up decent positions and probably could have been near the top, similar position maybe to where Ricciardo was at the end, I'd say, hunting down a podium.
What would have been really interesting was if he had a normal qualifying session, so qualified 5th, 6th, 4th, and then he's behind Max. Would he have been able to go with Max, or would he have been fighting in the midfield? Because Red Bull today, they could have, say if Albon was up there, they could have split the strategy. Say Albon doesn't pit, and then with Hamilton's puncher, Albon goes on to win the race. But unfortunately, Albon's not in that position to take advantage of something like that, and Red Bull can't split the strategic options. So it would have been,
depending on who's ahead, then they would have left that person out. So say Max was ahead, Max would have taken the win, and Albon would have got the fastest lap. That's the dream situation for that. Obviously, they couldn't do that, and that's what Albon was brought in to do, was to be there to play the second fiddle, to do that just in case. So there's always that pressure on the top, and today was the best example of where it was lacking. Good point. So that's the obligatory Alex Albon chat sorted.
What was it his fault, the incident, do you think? Because he got a 5-second time penalty. Does it deserve, do you think?
I think it reminded me. I think it reminded me of some of his incidents with Lewis.
Yeah, me too.
Tempted poke, or kind of one in roles reversed. So his kind of actions were Lewis's, but not bit of a half-hearted car positioning, and not really committing either way to the move or whatever, and then just catching the wheels. So I think, given that Lewis has got the penalties for that, and Albon's pushed for Lewis to be given penalties for those incidents, I think it's the precedent, and the precedent that's been set. I think it was a penalty.
On the precedent, I agree. I think it's a penalty. On the incident, I don't know. It was Magnussen didn't know he was there, which is fair enough, but Albon had every right to go for the attack because of Magnussen's entry to the corner being completely wayward. I don't discourage Albon going for the move. It's a shame that it came off how it did. If Magnussen had seen him there, then it would have been probably a scuff at least only. So I think, I don't know. I think it's a racing incident, but predominantly in Albon's favour of fault. But and we're in a sticky territory. But I do agree with you, Adam, that because of the incident with Hamilton and Albon, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, was the phrase you said for that. And if you're going to agree with Hamilton getting a penalty for that, which Albon is presumably, then reap what you sow.
Yeah, you both summed it up well there. I didn't think Hamilton deserved a penalty in Austria. So, looking at the incident itself, I wouldn't have given Albon a penalty. But like you guys have said, it's consistent.
Lap one and a safety car restart, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I would say kind of the rules are there to discourage different behaviour, and I feel like I don't want, most of the time, if you put your car in that position, it's going to end in at least contact. And so I feel like I'd rather not see those kind of overtakes being gone for, really, where you're pretty half-hearted, not really. There's a low percentage chance of getting it and a high percentage chance of putting one or both of the cars out. especially with a gravel trap next to it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to see DRS overtakes all the time. And when you've got a car in front of you and who has just like, he's a slow car, yes, but you know, it's hard to pass when you're stuck behind and in the early phases when you've got to get up as much as you can. That's your mindset, is you've got to get past and you can get the next guy and the next guy. And if, you know, the guy in front of you goes off a bit, he went wayward, did Magnussen in the entry to club. And that's just like, it's just, you would go for the chance because Albon he was just driving his race, say, and he would have had his foot down anyway. And it's just so happened that his foot down allowed him to get past Magnussen. He's not going to lift off and not go for the move because that's even worse.
Yeah, it's just the nature of open wheel racing. If it was touring cars or GTs, you know, they would have just made side to side contact and it'd be fine. But because it's open wheels, you made front and rear tyre contact, and then that happened. So I think I think he was definitely right to try and move, and Magnussen left enough space. He was just unlucky, really, just like Austria with Hamilton and Albon. I
think what made it more of an incident is because Albon did have to lift because it was such a tight corner, and that then created the contact wheel on wheel, because Albon was further ahead than Magnussen's rear wheel to his front left, but because of the way that I think Magnussen really just didn't see him. I think based on how he was driving, because Magnussen knows to not do that, even though he is a bit of an aggressive defender. He is gonna at least leave a foot of room.
Is that it?
Yeah, he'd leave a foot. And so I think that's just the reason why Albon was just like, well, I've got to lift out of this, otherwise my suspension goes and I'm just T-boning into the side of the monocoque where a person is. And that's not where he was thinking, but that's what would have happened. So that's what kind of then led to an incident and so on. That's the dissection of it from me. You're welcome. And it's just, a racing incident completely.
I think that, I don't know. I think he just would have been, I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, but even then, like, would he be better looking bigger picture? I mean, it might just be experience, you know, I don't know if Lewis would go for that or kind of some of the...
I think every driver would have gone for it.
I think they would, because he's gone off and he's given the chance for on a flat out bit of track to the cars to get to alongside. Then if it was through Beckett's, then that would be entirely different. But it wasn't. It was through Club where you're flat out. So
I don't know. I think I'd look kind of bigger picture. It's fifth lap, or
end of lap 1?
Was it?
Yeah, it was end of lap 1. The safety car came in lap 4.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, yeah, that must be what I'd noted down. But you know, it's kind of very early in the race. You're against Magnussen, who you know is an aggressive defender anyway. I feel like
I just don't think you think about who you're going up against. I mean, you see a Haas or a car in front of you, and you could go, "Oh, it's a car. I can overtake this car. I'm going to overtake this car." If it's Magnussen in front of you, I mean, good on Magnussen for cultivating a fear of personality for him that no one's going to overtake him. But he hasn't won a race because of it, so no one's not going to.
No, but about 5 drivers on the grid have won. 6 drivers on the grid have won races.
Yeah, well, 15 have had a podium. 15 drivers. I find that amazing.
Yeah, that's really ridiculous when you look at some of the drivers. Like, what? Yeah, Magnussen on his debut on the podium. So he knows what he's doing. Sometimes. We're not in the Magnussen.
Unlike Grosjean. What?
Yeah, let's get on to that. Yeah, cool. We're talking about racecraft and whether this is allowed or if this isn't allowed or if this is a penalty or this isn't a penalty. Romain Grosjean, director of the GPDA, was given the black and white flag halfway through the race for unsportsmanlike conduct after some rather aggressive defence against Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo, to name 2, and presumably a few more attempts we didn't see that were a little bit more sketchy, which is how Daniel Ricciardo described it. What do you guys think of the incidents? Do you think Grosjean was just a bit desperate, Nigel?
Oh, me. For me, that was pretty stupid what he did, because one day that type of move is going to end in an aeroplane Mark Webber Valencia style crash. And I think we saw it with Luca Giotto in the F2 in Hungary, and he didn't get a penalty at all. I think it didn't even get looked at. He did the same move going down to turn 4. He did it, and nothing happened. We saw it with Magnussen on Leclerc at Suzuka a couple of years ago. Verstappen has done it quite a few times, most famously at Spa in 2016 on the Ferrari drivers. And for me, it's just reacting too late. And one day it's going to have huge implications. And I think there's going to be a massive accident. Those are my thoughts. You might say, oh, he's just being aggressive, etc. But I think it's just one step too far for me.
Yeah, no, he's just being aggressive. And no, he's not really. It's stupid. I think, to be honest, calling it stupid is pretty kind, because if it's not stupid, then it's kind
dangerous.
It's dangerous. It's deliberately dangerous. And, I said I don't want to see the kind of moves that Albon makes where he sends a driver out, but that's low speed, just sending him into the gravel trap. It's not, as you say, if he collides there, then, the cars are a passenger. They're going 200 mile an hour straight into a barrier at the end of the straight. And, if they stay on the ground, they're lucky. It's really poor, and he seemed to have grown out of the reputation he got at the very start of his career of being dangerous to race against, but this has kind of put him right back in there. And he's chairman of the GTPA, and it's kind of not a good look for that either. Kind of in his position as elder statesman, it's not great. It's just really poor racing.
We saw in practice this weekend at Stowe, Alex Albon having an absolutely ridiculously fast crash when he just got a swapper on through Stowe. He'd already braked and was already coming out the corner, and that was still a high-speed crash. If Grosjean's move on Sainz was before the braking zone, yes, but it was so late because these cars brake so late that if they had just had a slight tap, that could have been a kink and a flip for Sainz, who had DRS, to have the lack of downforce from that. And he could have been rolling into the catch fence at Stowe at 200 miles an hour, end of. We saw Brendan Hartley's crash in practice at Silverstone in 2018, where he didn't have the chance really to brake because his suspension failed, and that ruined his weekend. He wasn't able to qualify, and then he wasn't able to race because of the incidents from that. But that's not the issue. The issue is that he basically flipped into the wall at the bottom of Brooklands, and that is just the examples of the high-speed crashes you can have at this track, and how it bites and how it absolutely destroys anyone who has any accident there. And if you're going to defend by weaving essentially into a car, Ricciardo, I don't know how Ricciardo avoided contact with that, but if they'd touched, then that would have been both of them out of the race. And I don't know, I don't want to think about that. And that's just appalling driving, I think, from Grosjean. When it's so obvious the crashes that you can have at these parts of the track. Grosjean's had a crash at Copse with Sainz in 2018. They came together because Grosjean got a little bit of oversteer. Yeah, that's fair enough. He got a little bit of oversteer. But they both flew into the wall at Copse. And that's Copse. Stowe and Brooklands.
And
immature driving.
Kvyat's impact off Beckett's, it completely broke his front wing. It looked like it broke off where they attach it or unattach it at pit stops and whatever. It looked like it just broke off at that. His rear suspension collapsed from it, and his rear wing came off. And that was kind of going through a corner, and when he spun round, it would have scrubbed off some speed there. As you say, it's just not. It's not thinking at all about the consequences of your actions, and it's just appalling racing.
The thing with this type of incident is that if they did make contact, Grosjean would have definitely got a penalty, but because they didn't,
got a race ban.
Black and white. Yeah, exactly.
He got a race ban for his incident in Spa in 2012, where he came across onto a car. Yeah, it was the start of the race, but he came across onto a car being Lewis Hamilton. Then Lewis then just had to catapult across, and we all know that ridiculous crash at that.
With that one, Lewis wasn't that as close. Sorry, but with that, Lewis was kind of, he wasn't side by side, or he wasn't as close. It wasn't.
Yeah, Grosjean just moved over into him because he just wasn't aware. But it's an entirely different kind of thing. But he got a race ban for that.
Yeah.
And if the kind of crash would get a race ban, Nigel, you continue.
Sorry, this is a good conversation. If the stewards don't do anything now, then we're going to see something we all don't want to see. And people will overlook this, will forget about this incident in a few days' time, probably.
Yeah.
But it's been coming, really, because Schumacher and Senna, I guess, started it, but since Verstappen came back, the rest of the field has followed on to do this kind of defensive move, where we see it quite a lot now.
We saw in the F3 race this morning, Alex Smolia took his first win on the road, and he was weaving around all on the track. And then F3 only came out with an announcement, sort of halfway through the F1 race, actually, that Smolia got a 5-second penalty for his weaving for AIT and dropped to 6. So that gave David Beckman the win if you're following F3. So he got a penalty, and David Beckman only had an opportunity to overtake about twice, but he was just weaving to break the toe. But he was still weaving across the track and making movements that he should have been making on the track, and he got a penalty. And that's the first penalty we've really seen for movements on the track. We had a lot of warnings. We had two black and white flags in today's race. There's one for Stroll as well late on for some of his defense on Ocon, I think. And so its use is good, and I applaud Michael Massey for using that and basically saying to the drivers, you're being ridiculous here, mate. Stop it, or we're going to do something else. And to be fair, I didn't see an incident with Grosjean later on, but he did pit and put himself out of contention, to be fair. But that's worked. But we don't want to see the black and white flag for every bit of incident, because that will just make it illegitimate.
Also, I'm shutting down. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay. We'll carry on. I think Grosjean got the black and white flag for his defence on, was it one of the McLarens? But then he went on to do it against Ricciardo. So
that's true, actually.
I guess he didn't really learn, even though the team told him. But yeah, for me, it will get overlooked, and I'm just worried about the way F1's going, because this kind of thing we're seeing it more and more, and I'm just wondering. I mean, didn't they make a rule called the Verstappen rule?
Kind of end of 2016. So kind of around you talked about Spa 2016. There's the shot I have in my mind, which I always think of when I think of this kind of thing, is Kimi Räikkönen closing down the Kemmel Straight with DRS on Verstappen, and then Verstappen just kind of sort of eases in front of him, and Kimi Räikkönen has to lift off really, really a lot. And Räikkönen was absolutely incensed at the end of that. And then later on, Verstappen kind of did it a few more times, and he did it on Hamilton in Suzuka, coming into the final chicane at Suzuka. And Hamilton was a bit miffed at that move, because Verstappen seemed to sort of just easily put himself over in front of Hamilton. Not really care, but we've seen a lot of big accidents coming out of 130R and into that chicane from any contact, because that's just the nature of Suzuka. So a rule was brought in to really clarify you will get a penalty if you move under braking, and it was given to Sebastian Vettel at the Mexican Grand Prix when he had his massive rant at Charlie Whiting and the whole system there, because Ricciardo and Verstappen were ganging up on him there. And that was just a massive statement to say, this is not what you do, this is not how you perform, this is not how you race. If you're going to be moving under braking, you're putting people at risk. And still, we had all these incidents today.
Yeah, perfectly put. I couldn't add any more. I think the days of Raikkonen and Hamilton, who are the cleanest drivers, have gone. I think, and this newer generation is it might cause a few problems.
Yeah, so the midfield was actually pretty interesting at the start of the race. It was where all the action was, and it was ridiculously congested. You could see the whole sort of field down the pit straight, and it came to a fall really for Renault at the end. We had Ricciardo in 4th and Ocon in P6. A very good showing for them. Kind of what they needed is a sort of a headline result, and I think Ocon, once he got past Stroll, had a very good weekend comparatively to his previous ones, but Ricciardo just being the class act that he is. What do you guys think, Adam?
Yeah, I really like Ocon. His story is just... So he had his dad was a mechanic and his family didn't have much. It's quite similar to Lewis's, I think. And they kind of, I think they lived out of a motorhome for a lot of his racing career.
Oh, wow.
And he's, just such. I really want him to do well, and it's a shame that he's not kind of done well so far. But yeah, this race was really good from him, and he pulled some good moves around the outside. And yeah, I think he dropped down to 11th after the second safety car. So I think he made good progress in, at the start of the race, and then dropped down and had to make it up again. And yes, he got, the fortune of gaining 2 places through Bottas and Sainz at the end, but kind of well deserved for him. So yeah, that's kind of a good news story there. And Ricciardo does well. He was close to Leclerc, but I don't think he made a move at the end. And he was
2 seconds off.
He was
seconds off the podium in the Renault.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And he was locked in a battle with the McLarens for a lot of it. That was quite a good little scrap through there. So yeah, it's really good result for Renault, and yeah, kind of rewarding their hard work. And it's just good that they're making progress and they've got something tangible to hold up.
Yeah,
I think that's Ricciardo's best. Oh, sorry, but I think that's Ricciardo's best result for Renault off the top of my head.
It matches it. Yeah, he got 4th in Monza last year.
Right. Sorry, Nigel.
So I think 1 lap more and Ricciardo would have caught Leclerc because he was catching him really quickly after the McLarens. Yeah, so it was really encouraging weekend for Renault. They showed really good pace. In practice, I think they were messing about with trying to work out the upgrades they brought, the setup as well, because the teams are seeing how much wing they could run, because obviously you want to run as less as possible without hurting the car in the corners. So yeah, it's a breakthrough hopefully for them after a few not tough weekends. I think they underperformed, whereas this weekend they were much better, and hopefully this is the start of something they can gain some momentum, because they are going to put some more money into Formula One, and they've got Alonso coming in next year, as we've talked about. But yeah, this weekend there were some really, really good signs.
Yeah, I think it really bodes well for next week, because if Ricciardo and Ocon were the prime examples of how to look after your tyres and make a late race charge, and if they can carry that, well, presumably they can carry that through to the softer compounds next week, a risk of, we're speaking about tyres again, but, get with it. And then they could be ones to watch from lap 42 next week, I think.
The Renault seems very good with its tyres. In fact, I'd say it's probably the best car out there with its tyres, so that could help, especially with some tracks. Barcelona, that could be really hot there as well.
That's true. Oh, yeah, that'd be boiling
with tyre wear. Yeah, Mugello as well with the high speed. So Renault could come into play and perhaps get a podium in the next few races.
Mugello is going to be a nightmare track for tyres. It's fast corners every direction.
Zandvoort would have been interesting this year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If they did Zandvoort in the summer, oh, man, they'd be using that beach next door. Anyway, we mentioned that Ricciardo was fighting with the McLarens all race. We obviously already mentioned that Sainz was put out of contention for points with his dramatic puncture in the closing stages. But Lando Norris came home in 5th place, 10 more points for the young man from wherever he's from, Glastonbury. And I think that's probably all they could have hoped for. 5th place worked out quite well. Yeah, they would have hoped for the 4th place, but Ricciardo was just coming really hard at the end. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, there was they were part of, for a lot of the race, there was kind of a big train. I think there was, I don't know, it was like from 5th to 14th or something. There was a massive train of cars running within a second of each other for kind of a lot of the middle of the race, and they were in that. And yeah, it looked like they got the better of Ricciardo, and then he came back at them, and obviously at the end they lost it with Sainz. I mean, 4th, could they have got 3rd? Probably not, without kind of some more luck, or getting, it's 4 seconds the gap to Charles. So I think 4th is probably the best they could have got, but Ricciardo probably deserved it, I think.
Yeah, I think McLaren they'll be kind of happy with this weekend. They brought some upgrades. I don't know if they would have thought they would have been a bit more. Well, I don't know because Ferrari. Well, Leclerc was outstanding, wasn't he? So I don't know if that's an outlier for Ferrari and whether McLaren are actually better. And Racing Point for me underperformed. So yeah, McLaren they're in the mix, and I think they can definitely get another podium at some point this weekend, if not next week, because they definitely had the pace. And yeah, both drivers are doing all right.
Yeah, that seems to be all there is to say about them. They got there. They up until the end, they were on for sort of solid third best team, definitely, with only the might of Leclerc and the talent of that guy really sort of putting them to bed. But without that, they were, I think very solid.
Yeah, I think Sainz has been unlucky this year, really, because in Austria he got the wrong strategy and the safety car went the wrong way and stuff like that. And then today he had the puncture. So I think Sainz is doing better than people think on the track. So
he can pick himself up.
But yeah, definitely.
We saw that last year. He didn't get points until Baku last year.
Yeah.
And then came through to be the wonder kid that was Carlos Sainz's 2019 season.
I feel like he's kind of been unlucky this season, but he was probably a bit luckier last season.
Yeah.
With the trouble that Norris faced, and if Norris hadn't kind of had his problems, he could have been more in the running for the Ferrari seat because he was kind of a name thrown around, but never really in contention. But yeah, I feel like it's evening out now, really, between them, and Norris has definitely stepped up as well this season.
Yeah, and that's been such a common conversation with McLaren is the Norris's just step up, and Norris's change of mindset really this year. He would come out of a race last year and just dwell on all of the mistakes and dwell on the fear of it. And I don't know whether it's the closed races where it's giving him a sort of impression of a lot less pressure, not a lack of pressure. There's obviously still the pressure to perform, but whether it's a lack of pressure because of the closed event, I don't know whether that's a subconscious effect. It probably isn't, because that sounds a bit bizarre now I say it out loud. But yeah, he is performing really, really well. Second year in Formula One, Sainz into sixth full year in Formula One, and he's been consistently matched with Lando Norris. Yeah, I think if there is another podium for McLaren, I think Norris would be the one to pick it up again.
Totally agree with that.
Well, I think both can get one, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
Both will. Yeah.
7th place today went to Pierre Gasly.
Yay!
It was a very good drive. Yeah,
he's been doing well. He's actually outperforming Albon. He out-qualified him in Hungary. He out-qualified him in Britain and finished ahead of him. So yeah, he's been doing pretty well. He's done well since he went back to Toro Rosso, really. Mm-hmm. So it kind of just looks like that team suits him a lot better. I don't think he'll ever get another chance at Red Bull, but yeah, I'm happy for him because last season was clearly such a struggle for him. And yeah, he's doing well, and he's really extracting the maximum out of that car because it's probably not, the 7th best car driver combo on the grid, but they're doing very well.
Yeah, the car weirdly seems more comfortable or easier to drive than the Red Bull does the AlphaTauri. It seems to suit Gasly's style, and he's really showing. He's really had some impressive performances this year. Today, again, picking up the pieces, picking up more points when others had problems. So yeah, he's doing all the right things. He's Gasly, and it's great to see him come back, because I thought last year there was a chance that being dropped by Red Bull might have deflated him and his F1 career could have been over quite quickly, but he's picked it up really well, and that's really impressive from him.
Yeah, again, just solid drive, beneficiary of the having some good rubber at the end and being able to sort of survive. And he finished second and a bit up the road from Albon, which is, I think he'll have a beer tonight and deserve it. Then we go back and then we go down the grid and we move on to the enigma that is the Racing Point Formula One team.
Mm.
Lots and lots of stories with that team this weekend, not least the ninth place of Lance Stroll, but also the shock return of Nico Hülkenberg to Formula One, only to not make the start. What do you guys have to say on the Pink Panthers?
Heartbreaking, really, for Hulkenberg to not start. Hopefully, he'll get a chance this weekend. We'll have to see what happens with Perez, of course. But I was surprised that Racing Point wasn't better. I was surprised that they didn't have the pace. I don't know if it's Stroll not getting the best out of the car, or are we expecting too much? Maybe. But for me, I was surprised they only. What did he come again? 8th or 9th?
Ninth. It's clear.
Yeah. I would have thought coming into the weekend they would have got a top 5. So I was surprised that they didn't have the pace. Was it? They might have just got the setup wrong maybe this weekend, and they'll bounce back next weekend. So yeah, they were a disappointment for me today.
I think it was surprising that they were out-qualified by a Ferrari and a McLaren.
Yeah.
That's really surprised me. For Stroll, I wasn't surprised with Hulkenberg's position. Obviously, he's not been training with us at all. So, give him his due.
I think he was, first of all, he was the right choice. Kind of of the options they had. I think it would have been very interesting to see Van Dorn in the seat and see how he went. Obviously, he was racing in Formula E. So that was out. And Gutierrez, I don't think anyone would have been excited to see him back.
There was some discussion on Twitter around Thursday night when all of this kicked off, and people were sort of discussing, what are the alternatives then? Gutierrez. And then someone sort of put something forward saying, does Gutierrez actually have a super license? And there seemed to be a kind of sort of discussion that he didn't have a super license. And I don't really know where that came from. I think there was, I think it is fine. I think there is some sort of clause that makes it fine, and that he does have the correct license, but he hasn't tested open wheel machinery really since 2016. I think he did a Formula E race, I think, but got like a point, and that was it. I don't think he's done the amount of testing that is required for the super license.
He would have done a lot of work as Mercedes reserve driver. He would have done a lot of work on simulator in Mercedes machinery, which is Racing Point is. So that, I guess that would have stood him in good stead. But yeah, I thought Hulkenberg was the right choice. But I'm still kind of not, and we've had this debate before, I'm kind of still not convinced that Racing Point are kind of as fast in the race, kind of as a team, as their car over one lap suggests. I think there is kind of a difference between that, and it's probably over their performance. They were quickest in FP2, and they've kind of, in a lot of the practice sessions over the season, they've been, kind of right up there. But I'm not sure, kind of, in terms of race pace, that they are. I think they're more in the midfield fight, especially with their drivers. So I think kind of if you add all of that in as a bundle, I think they're still kind of midfield team. But even having said that, ninth really kind of isn't a great result for them. And Hulkenberg not even making it to the start isn't great either.
I don't think Stroll had a good race. He was quite good in Hungary last time, but for me, he could have made overtake. He should have. I just feel other drivers would have been able to make some overtakes, which he wasn't able to do. And I don't think he managed his tyres very well, because obviously everyone was on the hard tyres for 40 laps. I don't think Stroll got the best out of them. So it is hard to say whether it's the drivers letting them down, or is it the car isn't as good as what I think, at least. So yeah, it's a tough one for Racing Point, and yeah, it's just for Hulkenberg, it's just so disappointing, really. And he showed good pace in practice and qualifying, I thought.
He was stepping it up and getting better and better each session. I think in the early qualifying runs, he was matching Stroll pretty much to within a tenth. And that's ridiculous to step into a car you haven't been training for however long. Yes, he's missed only 3 races, but he's missed the absolute brute training that these guys would have been doing in lockdown because they're bored. He wasn't doing it because he wasn't bored. I don't know. But yeah, Hulkenberg came in and did really well, and it's a bit of a shame he didn't start the race. But I do think he will be racing next week based on the laws in the UK, the 10 days quarantine period from the Thursday, and the final test being announced positive on the Friday morning. The Thursday afternoon. That brings itself to the Sunday anyway, so he's not going to be racing Perez. Hulkenberg will be in that seat. I'm so 99% sure on that.
The only thing I would say is that, well, Racing Point, or because it's F1 and it's not like a normal person, will there be some kind of exemption maybe, and it will only be 7 days. I think you're right, it should be. I think Hulkenberg should race this weekend, not Perez, just to be on the safe side. And maybe we can talk about this in the next episode. But I think what Perez did was a bit silly, if the reports are right.
I think on the Perez thing, I did hear kind of some noises coming from Racing Point that maybe he will be able to race next week, but I don't know.
Yeah, I heard that.
I don't know what that was actually based off. So yeah, and also I think if he does win, sorry,
that seemed to me to come from a bit of just old information where, like, I'm pretty sure it was mandated by law that, like, you had to self-isolate for 7 days. Definitely, it was recommended 14 days in the UK. I think it was getting too political. But on the Thursday, it was announced that it had been extended to 10, and whether the information to that wasn't like relayed properly, I don't know. It's just kind of like, because they're obviously involved in their own massive situation, they're not going to check for the news or anything. So, and but yeah, I think they were very clear on the Thursday and Friday that it's up to Formula One organising it with the UK government. The UK government have put out a ruling saying it's 10 days. It will be 10 days then, surely. Otherwise, it's just stupid.
Yeah.
And they've got to put in the right examples. I mean, Boris Johnson said, let's get Formula One. We need to get Formula One. And that's why this British Grand Prix is happening. And that's why there's been an exemption for the periods of the quarantine periods coming into the country and all of that for the Formula One. And that's brilliant. But also the best example to make is to make them quarantine for the right amount of time if they get it. And that's what's going to happen politically as well as sensibly.
I think Nico Hulkenberg will, if he races next weekend, he will score points. I'm going to put that out there because I think
if he starts.
Whoa, Adam, you're getting way too Silverstone preview here.
If he can get onto the grid, yeah. But he definitely was trending in the right direction. But
definitely,
you said on Perez, I feel kind of, in one way I feel bad because if his mum was in like Buckinghamshire or France, he would have been allowed to go and see her and it would have been fine. And it's kind of a very emotional thing to have, your mum in trouble and in hospital, whatever. But on the flip side, it wasn't in Buckinghamshire or France, and he did kind of go to one of the COVID hotspots to visit her. So yeah, it's a really emotional situation for him, which is kind of why I feel bad criticising him for it. But
if you took photos with fans, I don't feel bad for him. If that's what he did,
he went to a holiday resort, didn't he?
Yeah, he went to a restaurant, I believe, and he didn't have a mask. He took photos with fans, and for me, if you're as a multi-millionaire sportsman, you should be more responsible, and you should put your career first. So.
Yeah, I think that was just completely stupid.
Seems to be a big lack of understanding.
If that's true,
a big lack of understanding. We've seen this in between the Austria race and in between the Styria and Hungary race, but Bottas and Leclerc going back to Monaco. Norris.
That's worse.
That is worse, really. Norris went back to the UK for back treatment, but that was all mandated by McLaren, which was different, I think, because that was mandated by McLaren for the physiotherapy. Bottas and Leclerc went back, and Perez then all went to different places in the gaps, which were a bit. Bottas and Leclerc did it well in that they went there and they had their COVID tests at home and everything.
Well, Leclerc had met up with friends though.
I think Leclerc
did not know
has got away with it big time.
Yeah,
because what he did was worse than what Perez did, in my opinion, and it's a massive wake-up call.
again, with the
Yeah,
politics, the Monaco
think-
situation is interesting because in France, the lockdown is technically lifted. So I don't know how that extends into Monaco, but presumably pretty similar because, you know, they're able to film that weird grand rendezvous, whatever it was, with Charles Leclerc in the lockdown, with him driving a Ferrari around Monaco for some reason. They're able to film that way before the majority of places. So things in Monaco are good COVID-wise.
yeah.
So it's different with that, in that they're allowed to have those kind of get-togethers in the country, in the principality.
Obviously, it's bad for
very political.
For Perez. You know, having COVID is such a bad thing, and we all we hope he gets better, finally has a full recovery.
Yeah, we should have said that. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess for F1 and for kind of sending a warning out, this is the first time that it has, that, you know, people have broken the rules and had a positive COVID test, and I think a lot of the drivers will kind of change their views on it and or kind of actions on it, because for Perez, this is, you know, he's fighting for his seat next year, and we've discussed a lot about that, about whether he'll stay or not, but, you know, his seat is on the line, and he's a track where they were predicted to go well at, and he's lost 2 weekends from that. So, you know, that's big. That could be, you know, 20-ish points if he got in the top 5, and he's kind of throwing that all away. So it will be a wake-up call for all the drivers, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We obviously, as Adam's touched on there, we do wish Sergio Perez the absolute best, and also his family, who've presumably gone to similar places as him. We wish them the best as well. We don't know anything that's happened to them, but yeah, if there's any bad things for any of them, we wish them all the absolute best and pray for a speedy recovery for all of them. Yes. Moving on then to Sebastian Vettel, who rounded out the points in what was an absolutely dire weekend for poor Seb. Just didn't have the pace and didn't have the practice time, and I don't think that really led to him not having the pace. I just think he was just slow.
Yeah, it's a bit similar to Red Bull. So Vettel's like Albon, Leclerc's like Verstappen. Leclerc seems to handle the Ferrari much better because the Ferrari looked atrocious in practice. It was horrible to drive, and Vettel, it doesn't seem to suit Vettel's style. And yeah, he wasn't. We hardly saw him in the race, and he really, really, really struggled. And whether he can turn it around, I'm not sure. So yeah, really bad weekend.
I thought he, up until across Styria and Hungary, I thought he kind of had 2 decent races, or kind of his stock had risen a bit, because within Ferrari, Leclerc took most or all of the blame and the flack for the incident that took them both out at Styria, and then Leclerc kind of combusted in Hungary and just couldn't get any pace out of the car, and Vettel brought it home in 6th, which was very good. And yeah, it's not. He just didn't have the pace. It's like you said, it's kind of simple. And there are a few drivers who had pretty poor weekends and just, you know, didn't show much. But he's definitely up there. It'll be whether he can bounce back. He won 2 years ago. That's kind of the crazy thing. It's how much has changed. That he won 2 years ago, and yeah, now he's kind of in 10th. And will he do better next weekend? There's not many signs to suggest that he will.
Yeah, basically just not good. I think it was compounded by Leclerc having one of the best drives of the year so far to lug that Ferrari up there to the hefty heights of P3, which was absolutely fantastic for him. It was such a good drive for Leclerc, and that just, even Vettel just wasn't even in the middle ground of that Ferrari performance. He was at the absolutely other extremity of poor, and to get 1 point again for Vettel, he got 1 point in the first race, 1 point in this race. I don't know if he's even really if he's run in the top 4 at all. Obviously, he ran in 5th in Hungary for a bit, but that was it.
Yeah, I mean, he probably should have got. He made a mistake at the end in Hungary, but he was on for 5th there and kind of looked like he would have deserved it. And Leclerc's got 2 podiums, but both of them have been from the fact that in his good races, the leaders have messed up. So, there is kind of, if Vettel had the same fortune at Hungary, it could have been different. He could have been fourth or third, but he wasn't. And yeah, Leclerc seems to definitely be the dominant driver at the moment.
Well, Ferrari were lapped in Hungary, weren't they? So I don't know if it would have even mattered what happened in the front. True. But Leclerc was given a bad strategy in Hungary as well, with putting to the soft tyres. We talked about that in our Hungary podcast, which you can watch after this one. It's
a long road for Ferrari. It's a sad road for Ferrari, but if John Elkann's right, they can win in 2022. I don't know about you guys. I don't have any plans for 2022 yet, but watching Ferrari win might be one of them. So yeah, cool. If we go out of the points really, and I'll just sort of run through the results. We've got Valtteri Bottas in 11th. We've got George Russell in 12th. Carlos Sainz has a recovery to 13th. Antonio Giovinazzi in 14th. Nicholas Latifi in 15th. The end of Romain Grosjean's race was in 16th. And Kimi Räikkönen, who had front wing issues really close to the end and finished the last one on the road in 17th. Anything to add on any of those guys? Decent performance from Russell, I think, 12th. I mean, he's still behind Bottas. He could have been 11th if Bottas' puncture was a little bit worse.
Well, I don't know how much worse Bottas' puncture could have been, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have happened 200 metres back, or it could have shredded, but it was kind of, for a puncture, it was pretty bad. But yeah, he didn't really seem to pop up on the TV much. I didn't really see much of his race that I can remember, but yeah, 12th is better than 19th, which is where he was running around last season.
12th from 20th, I think, is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he beat Latifi again, of course, so that's all we can do, really. Just a question of whether...
Not by much.
Get a point. Yeah,
he was 2 or 3 seconds up. 2 or 3 seconds up the road was Russell on Latifi, and I think that's brilliant for Latifi. When we've looked at Russell as this absolutely shining beacon of talent stuck in a poor car, and Latifi's been quite negated in perception, but to finish that close to Russell, and he was shown on the world feed doing an overtake around Kimi Räikkönen.
A world champion
Kimi Räikkönen in the Supreme Alfa Romeo. Then it has been a good weekend for Latifi. You're right. I cut you off a bit there, Nige.
If we extrapolate Russell 20th to 12th, if he qualified in 15th, so if he'd started there, he would have finished 7th.
Wow. What
I think for Williams...
He would have been tapped out by Albon at the start.
Yeah, I think for Williams, if you compare it to this time last year, it's a massive, massive improvement. So that's the big thing for them, I guess. And I'm hopeful that Russell and Latifi can get some points this year.
Yeah. So am I. Yeah. I think it's only really a matter of time, I think, for them to get points. They're putting in tidy races.
The with Alpha and Haas now, I think, whereas last year they were in their own, field as well. But now they seem with Alpha and Haas and with the weird race a bit like today, they can definitely nick the points somewhere.
I don't see them. I just feel like there's been several weird races where they've not. I don't know. I don't feel that confident that they will get points because they don't look kind of in pace there with Alpha and Haas, but in race pace, I'm not sure. I think their qualifying trim is a lot better than their race pace.
Yeah,
and I kind of don't back the Williams setup, kind of team strategy, whatever, to take advantage of kind of crazy situations in the same way that I would for other teams. I feel like could be another unlucky year for George Russell.
I think this race was actually a pretty perfect example of what you're saying there, Adam. You've got Haas left Grosjean out in 5th place to see what could happen. I mean, it was a bit redundant in the end, but they tried something different. even with one car only left in the race, Williams had 2 cars in the race. They probably could have done something a bit more avant-garde and gone for it maybe in future. Would you think that would be a better idea for Williams?
Well, the prime example is Germany last year, where they had the chance to kind of risk it on the strategy. And was it Kvyat that they were running with, or Kvyat and Stroll?
They were close to Stroll, and Stroll finished 4th. Yeah. Stroll also led a lap.
So they were kind of in that group, and they didn't risk the strategy at all. And Kubica got a point because of the Alpha's penalties for
penalties, yeah.
But it wasn't. That's just the kind of thing that I feel like, and I didn't really understand why Grosjean didn't pit. I don't know whether it was just to give them more, exposure in the midfield or whatever, or just to see what would happen, because if they did pit, then they'd be, kind of mired and have no chance. But I just feel like Williams don't, like you said, it seemed a pretty perfect example that they're not risking things on strategy, and I don't think they're going to score points on pure pace.
Yeah, so we just want to close off the podcast with giving a bit of time to the diversity situation in Formula One. Obviously, this is the second race that they've properly done something where they get the drivers to the front of the grid, the first being Austria at the start of the year. And I just want to see what you guys think. I think it's a very good thing. They've actually dedicated some time to it. They've noticed the outcry at how ridiculously it was dealt with at the Styrian Grand Prix and how much of a mess it was in Hungary. And they've actually made an opportunity for the drivers to stand and to show their appreciation to end racism in all forms across the world. What do you guys think? Do you have anything to say on this, Nige?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is a much better job. Hopefully we get to see this every weekend. It's interesting. Magnussen has been taking a knee, but he didn't today. I don't know why. That's something I saw. But overall, it was, they dedicated some time, which was exactly the right thing to do. Better late than never, I guess. But a much better job from F1.
Yeah, I think it's important that this isn't kind of the end of their end racism stuff, that they don't kind of, say, oh, well, we've taken the knee now and done that and move on. It needs to kind of be the start of kind of actual meaningful change to the sport, and that makes it more diverse. But it's good that they got it organised and got it together and devoted some time and effort to it, and can't knock them for that. So I'm glad to see the change, but it has to be the start of the change, not the end.
Yeah, completely. And we can wax lyrical about the different positions that drivers have taken, and how some are, taking the knee, some quite pointedly aren't. And it's a really difficult situation to talk about. But I think Formula One has finally really realised that, this isn't an issue we can put it on as a PR exercise. This is an issue that needs to be properly tackled head on. We need to fight racism, not just say we stand against racism, which seemed, and I think, to be honest, to Formula One, there was a lot of criticism in the past few weeks, but the majority of the organisations that put out all of their statements at the end of May and June to stand with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the protests that were going on around the world, that still are going on around the world. A lot of that has just dried up, and that just became a PR exercise. Whereas with Formula One, they've launched the Re-Race of One as one initiative, and they have taken a lot of steps. And there's the Hamilton Commission as well, and there is diversity programs being set up and so on. So Formula One, on the face of it, has done more than most, but there's still so much more to do. They're on television around the world every week, Friday to Sunday, and then all over social media. It's one of the biggest sports in the world, and they are doing something about it, and the statement is huge. So I think, well done, Formula One. Formula One also in the pre-grid procedure gave some time to say thank you to the NHS, the health services that have helped, and all the key workers that have helped fight the COVID-19 pandemic that has obviously been horrible for the entire world. And I think, again, well done. That is a very good message to put out there. The Spitfire flyover saying thank you NHS on the bottom of it. The entire grid clapping was an incredible sight to see, I think. And it really, that shows that they are, there is an understanding of what to do, what we should be thankful for, how we should live and how we should be. And it was, I think, the pre-grid procedures today in Formula One were very good. And I think they should carry over, particularly with the racism stuff, and they should thank key workers all around the world. And I think that's what today was for, was to thank everyone who has put their life on the line to help the lives of others. And that's been fantastic from the world this year. I speak for both of you when I say it's fantastic what people have done, and we also stand with Formula One and are against racism and support all of the key workers, and everything that Formula One is standing for, we also support.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it then for us this week for the Silverstone edition of the Winging It F1 podcast. We're back later in the week. We're going to do a Formula E preview podcast for the Formula E season, which kicks off this week with a double header at Berlin, followed by a double header at Berlin, and then closing off with a double header in Berlin. And we're going to do a preview podcast of that to talk about the talking points going into the Formula E season, which is a cracking series. I really urge you to watch it if you've not seen Formula E before. It's brilliant. It's so much fun, and it's half a season, 9 days. Yes, Adam, watch Formula E, mate. We don't need to go into that. Yeah, so we're going to be doing that. We're going to have our 70th anniversary Grand Prix preview as well for next week's race at Silverstone, which I really love that name, the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. I think it's really good. I'm a sucker for the history of F1 as well, which is why I'm so looking forward to Imola. Anyway, so yeah, we'll be back then for all of that, and we hope to see you then. In the meantime, you can listen to this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Acast. You can watch it on YouTube, and you can follow us on Twitter at Winging It F1. You can follow us personally on Twitter. I'm FredCoach1999. Do you guys want to plug yourself?
I'm at Adam Dickinson01.
And I am at Nigel C0, but you probably already knew that.
Yes, we have said this a lot, and it's in our description.
We're going to keep saying it.
We're going to keep saying it. I have still not got 1 million followers, so this is the time. Yeah. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, looking forward to it next week. Looking forward to the preview and the quiz. We'll be seeing I'll be taking a week out, so I can't lose again. And it will be Freddie versus Nigel, the two in-form competitors going head-to-head. And yeah, there's a Formula E, but don't bother watching that because it's awful.
Yes, today's race was amazing, wasn't it? Until lap 49, wasn't it, Adam? Bye.
Yeah, it's all right. But at risk of getting into an hour-long discussion about what Formula E is and isn't, let's say goodbye. All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. We hope you have an excellent week and see you soon. Bye-bye.